Okay, this brings us to item 6.
Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee report relative to the charter officer eval process. This is intended to be an informational report.
Councilor Greenwald for a motion.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to suspend the rules of order to allow consideration of the committee report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. A suspension of the rules is non-debatable and requires a 2/3 vote. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Counselor Jacobs?
Yes.
Counselor Manwaring?
Yes.
Counselor O'Connor?
Yes.
Counselor Clark?
Yes.
Counselor Khan?
Yes.
Counselor Filio?
Yes.
Counselor Powers?
Yes.
Counselor Sutherland?
Yes.
Counselor Hansel?
Yes.
Counselor Hooper?
Yes.
Counselor Chadbourne?
Yes.
Counselor Jones?
Yes.
Counselor Richards?
Yes.
Counselor Greenwald?
Yes.
Okay, Councilor Greenwald for a motion.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to amend the committee report by adopting the charter officer evaluation process as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. At this point, I would like to ask Beth Fox if she would come forward and explain what this is all about.
Assistant City Manager, Human Resources Director. Before the start of the meeting, I think I put on the table for each of you a packet of materials. It was entitled Keene City Council Personnel Evaluations for Charter Officers. If you can locate that, we'll be referring to that as I go through my remarks. First, I thought I'd start just by walking you quickly through the packet. There's a variety of documents. The first document is a narrative which basically outlines the process that would be in place for charter officer evaluations. The next group of attachments is a group of forms that pertain to the performance categories and then the evaluation form for the city manager's position. As you know, we have 3 charter officers in the city. They have each have different duties and each, as a result, have specific criteria that are applicable to their individual positions. The second attachment, Attachment B, is performance categories again and the form for the city clerk. The third attachment, Attachment C, are those same documents as they pertain to the city attorney. And the final attachment is Attachment D, which is just a flow chart that attempts to summarize at a glance for folks the evaluation process, making it easy for anyone who might be using it to quickly know sort of where we are and what's next. As you know, recently we did some modifications to city code that pertain to the timing of the charter officers' evaluations. And at that point, it was identified that there was an opportunity to create a framework for the process that would better support both the charter officers and the members of council in this important effort. Working collaboratively, various members of the city council, the standing committee chairs, and the charter officers developed a performance management process that identifies actions, responsibility, and incorporates tools that directs that process towards goals and performance categories which were deemed to be the most important part of the employee evaluation process. As I said, when creating these tools, consideration was given to each of the varying responsibilities of the charter officers. So that resulted in, rather lengthy, robust group of attachments that's included in the packet distributed. When developing this process, the participants recognized that the effectiveness of an employee evaluation is enhanced by a deliberate approach that incorporates opportunities to reflect, organize, and plan. It also recognized that some predictability benefits the long-term employee-employer relationship. The evaluation process that was advanced as a result of the collaboration strives to provide both opportunities for input and a planned evaluation conversation focused on prior goals, performance characteristics, and future goals that will advance the City Council's vision. When considering various approaches to implementing the evaluation, working this process through the standing committee chairs was deemed to represent both the full range of city operations that a charter employee interacts and impacts, and any goals that might be set through the evaluation process. Next, I want to quickly just walk you through the process. You might want to use the flow chart. It's just a brief guide. As it indicates, HR is charged with the responsibility of kicking it off when an charter employee's anniversary date arrives. That kickoff is really providing the FOP chair the communication tools and documents for the appropriate charter officer process. HR's role in this process, at its opening and its close, is administrative, and once opened, it is members of the City Council who are charged with managing the evaluation process and providing its necessary input. FOP Chair is responsible for distributing to the counselors performance characteristics, inviting their input, and advancing to the charter employee the evaluation form, which invites their participation. As you work down the left side of the flow chart, the City Councilor side, they provide input. That input comes in through the standing committee chairs, folks that the various members of the council usually work most closely with, and then the standing committee chairs bring that input to the FOP chair, who's responsible for compiling it to be considered in the evaluation process. On the right side, I'll call it for now the employee side of the chart, the employee is charged with developing their report out for the evaluation, detailing their prior goals and proposed goals, and a narrative. When that's complete, the FOP chair would share that with the standing committee chairs. When both sides have sort of completed their work, the mayor is then charged with convening the standing committee chairs together to prepare for the evaluation session. When they've completed that preparatory work, the session is scheduled. The standing committee chairs and the charter employees conduct that very important evaluation conversation. They can consider performance, prior goals, proposed goals, and any concerns expressed by individual counselors in that piece of the evaluation process are shared. Work product that would then result from the evaluation session is finalized by the standing committee chairs, with the FOP chair responsible for finalizing any documents related to the evaluation and sharing the end result with the employee. Following that, there's an opportunity for the employee to have a final comment. The evaluation process closes and is finalized. The completed evaluation would then come to HR. We'd prepare what document we use at the city to close out any evaluation, which is an ESR. That would be finally signed off by the mayor and the employee, and then all those documents would be incorporated into the employee's confidential personnel file. We expect, as with any process, it is likely that some experience working through it will identify opportunity for improvement. In addition, we have some other initiatives that are ongoing, both council goal setting and the city manager recruitment, that may impact these procedures in the future. Recognizing evolution to the process is likely, proceeding at least initially more informally was deemed the best recommendation. I'm happy to answer any questions about the specific process. I didn't want to take you line by line through it, but I wanted to just give you a chance to kind of hear it on a high level. But I am available for any questions and happy to respond.
Does anyone have any questions of Beth before we go forward? Councilor Sutherland.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a question about the history. I think this is a new process. If you could give us a little background on how performance evaluations were done in the past, and whether or not this performance evaluation will impact compensation for any of the department heads? Thank you.
This evaluation process really only pertains to charter officers first, because the charter officers are the only people in the organization who work directly for the council. The city has an evaluation process run through its standard personnel practices that impacts the rest of employees. It could, in fact, the city has a STEP program that is applicable to the charter officers, so there is the opportunity for it to impact compensation. My understanding, because I'm not a charter officer, I've never been there, but my understanding based on discussion at FOP, and anyone else is welcome to chime in, is that the process before had been pretty much informal and always pretty much organized by the chair of the FOP, so it would depend on who was chair, how it might happen. We had this opportunity, I think, to try to standardize it a bit, and I think there is some benefit, so I think that was the motivation behind the change.
Further questions? Okay, thank you, Beth. Council Clark.
Well, thank you, Your Honor. A question we'll do Beth Fox. Section 22 of the Council Rules of Order has the Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee, the purview of evaluating the charter employees, and that's always been done in the past. Is that correct?
I don't know. I haven't been a participant in the process in the past.
How long
so
have you been working here?
Almost 4 years.
And in your 4 years, how long has it been when the Finance Personnel Committee been involved?
Frankly, Counselor, any evaluations of charter officers, I think, always occurred in non-public session. I wasn't privy to those sessions, so, you were here for them. I was not.
So you're not familiar with Section 22 of the Council
I
Rules of Order?
wasn't commenting on Section 22. I think the city attorney is best fit to address that. I was commenting on my knowledge of the evaluation process.
Thank you.
City Attorney, do you have Section 22 there?
Yeah, I do actually, and interestingly enough, Section 22 of the Rules of Order also is contained to some extent in Section 22 of the City Charter, which is interesting. I wonder if there was any reason for that. But I do, and I think what the council is referring to is the standing committees for the public and others who aren't necessarily familiar with the rules. Section 22 of the Rules of Order, which are rules that are developed by the City Council, deals with the creation of the committees through which the council operates. There are essentially 3 standing committees. The council is referring to the Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee. And there is a reference in the FOP list of things that it has jurisdiction over, a reference to the word personnel, but there is no specific definition in the rules as to whether personnel includes the charter officers or not. I can tell you that the rules of the city charter also doesn't provide any particular process by which the charter employees are evaluated. Again, for the public's edification, the Keene City Charter does carve out from the city 3 specific individuals who become charter employees and who operate at the sufferance of, and are employed at the sufferance of the city council. Those are myself, the city attorney, the city manager, and the city clerk. But as I said, there is no process defined for evaluating those individuals. I would submit to the council that I don't know why or how the FOP charge was created in the first place. I don't know what the reference to personnel was in that part of the rules. But the reason why I referenced Section 22 of the city charter, keep in mind that the city council does have a role in the personnel process within the city. And that includes the right of city employees to petition the city council in the event it has a personnel dispute within the administrative structure, including a dispute with the city manager. Employees do have the right to come before the city council to have that considered, and that would go before FOP at that point. FOP does technically and potentially have some supervisory role over the collective bargaining process as part of the employee process. I think it has been the practice of the city council, at least the time that I've been here for the city council, to deal with collective bargaining issues as a whole. But I would suspect that the council, if it wanted to, could send that back to the committee, FOP, for consideration. Last thing I want to suggest to the council is these are your rules. The charter you can't change. But the rules and the way the committee structure works are creatures of the council, and it's certainly up to the council if it wants to interpret those, they can interpret those.
And I would say, I think actually, I think that Councilor Powers probably recalls when the police union declared impasse, and that went to the Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee. And I know in 1988, when I was also on the council, that the same thing happened with the fire department union, and I believe, having participated in the drafting of those rules, that in fact the reference to personnel is a reference to the appeal process that the personnel in the city have to the Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee. The charter employees are hired by the entire city council, not by the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee, and their position is regulated by the entire city council. Okay, are there any further questions for Beth? Okay. Councillor Greenwald. Figure out who I'm dealing with here.
So these would be my normal remarks after moving a motion. I go back in time almost as far as the mayor as a counselor, and as we were chatting, anything that I don't know, he knows, and then when I came on is when he went off, so between us, we have some institutional memory here. Originally, the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee was composed of the chairs of each of the standing committees that at the time were doing double duty in essence. Each finance chair that I remember conducted these evaluations the best they could, designing their own systems. And, well, I remember comments from Councilor Zerba when he was the chair. I don't go back as far as Williams. I think Councilor Filio does. And Councilor Georgina, when she was the chair of finance, conducted it, and then ultimately the review finished up with a nice lunch. So and the feedback was given. The whole object of the process is to gather input from the council and speak with the charter officers, the clerk, the attorney, and the manager, and give and take as a positive process. When I became FOP chair, I did my best to design a process. I don't do this normally. I'm not a personnel director. I designed a process as well as I could with input from all of you, and it worked very well in some ways, not very well in some other ways. Ultimately, it did give feedback back and forth, but it was clumsy. I did the best that I could with it. A lot of what was discussed during this council's reign was we've got to get some standardization. We need some structure to it. And thus you see these evaluation, the matrix. The other thing that has become obvious to me anyway is that the closest individual counselors are typically is within their committee. So there's communication between the committee chair and the individual counselor. As far as I'm concerned, I think that's really key. The whole evaluation process really is a balance of being fair to the charter employee, getting the feedback from counselors, and do this in such a way that it respects everyone's privacy and also complies with the state right-to-know laws, which in this generation is a lot different from what it was back in the 80s, where small groups of counselors could meet. You can't do that. And it becomes very problematic, even just the finance committee meeting and excluding other counselors. So this is where this concept that's before you has come about. The committee chairs, mayor, and charter officers have met repeatedly to design a fair process, and that's what's before you. It respects everybody. Now, one of the very key facets of this, and as the HR director pointed out, these two boxes about input from the city councilors, it's key. Fill it out, write your letters, make your comments, anything, and it's the responsibility of the committee chairs to bring this forth and to encourage the communication. The evaluation is not about, well, this pothole wasn't filled, or perhaps somebody didn't respond to a letter or something of that sort. It's more the job performance, not the specifics, getting lost in the weeds. So that's very important. And then ultimately, when the committee chairs get together, after I have assimilated all the information, and this is a good deal of homework for me to put together, then the committee chairs meet with the charter employee. A lot more organized than the 15 of us sitting, taking shots at, or comments, questions, whatever, of the one employee. I think it's a lot more humane, and it's just a more fair process. Back on this right to know situation, a meeting of the committee chairs and mayor does not constitute a public meeting, and therefore it doesn't bring in all the 91A requirements. So just to wrap it up again, it's very important that all counselors participate in the process by submitting responses and written comments. Ultimately, this is all part of the permanent personnel file of the employee. So hopefully that answered some questions, concerns, and there you go.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to call item communications C3 off the table, and I'm going to recognize Councilor Clark.
This is not how I think this should be happening. First of all, when this was brought before the Finance Committee in July 14th, it was put on more time to the 28th. It didn't come back up on the 28th. It didn't come back up in August. It didn't come back up in September, nor October, nor the first meeting of November. This process that you see here was written in the dark, without discussion by any of you. Or if it was any of you, it wasn't done in the public light. We are supposed to be open. Our deliberations are supposed to be open. When we go behind the cloak in non-public session to discuss personnel matters or legal matters and such like that, that's what we do according to the statutes and how they allow us to do that. This was not done that way. I came to the committee last week to amend this, and I was told I could not amend this because this was not an action item. This was an information item. This was something that wasn't discussable in public. There's something wrong here. Now, I understand that we don't want to go through the embarrassing kind of a meeting like we had last year. Now, I can't go into it because that was non-public. But this isn't the way to remedy that. We have to stay open and accessible to the public. Going forward with this plan here, we're going to be out of the public eye. There's not going to be any official meetings. There's not going to be any minutes that are even held non-public. I think that I have a proposal that will meet the needs of what the concerns in the background that we have here that we can't talk about right now, but we need to discuss them in public. So I move that we put these both items, my proposal and this proposal here by, I'm not even sure who it's by, Collaborative, back to committee so that they can be discussed in the open. And then we can decide what we need to do and what process we need to do, rather than to have it done how it was done in July, August, September, October. I don't know what was going on back then, because I was not involved in this collaboration of participants that's been discussed. And I think we need to do that. And if we need to do it in non-public, then let's do it legally in non-public. Let's just not talk about these things and create policies behind everybody's back without everybody knowing about what's going on. These are very important things, and I understand it was very embarrassing last year. And I'm not going to go beyond that because I can't. But we need to come up with a policy, all of us, none of us left out of this, because I was left out of this. Probably many of you were left out of this. We need to talk about this. It's more than just being fair to the charter employees. We work for the public. They're the people that we ultimately answer to. You know, I understand that we need to be nice to our employees, and we need to be fair to them. But the people that elected us to this office here are the people that we answer to. So I would like a second on moving this back to committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Sutherland.
I think Councilor Clark brings forward some issues that I think that there hasn't been enough time to evaluate this. This, as I understand it, is brought forward by the Human Resources Director. The charter does call for the ability for the City Council to hire and remove the charter employees. But as such, I'm wondering why also there is not this process, this evaluation process, incorporated in as an ordinance. I'm just curious as to why. I don't know if this is something that needs to be done or why it should not be done. But for something of this should be possibly deliberated as to how it is incorporated into the policies of the city. Thank you.
Let me just point out the evaluation process for the charter officers has never been incorporated into any policy for the city. That in fact this is an experiment. We are actually bringing it to the full council, the process to the full council for the very first time. This is really an attempt to try to utilize a process. The original intent here was we were simply going to notify the council, and because of the nature of the discussion that's gone place, it's been decided that perhaps we should make this an action item so that in fact the council can vote on the process. But it's still an experimental process, and it's not being if it's successful, it'll become a council policy. If it is not successful, it'll be modified and something different will be tried. Councilor Powers.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think several people here this evening have said that we haven't had a process. And I've been here 29 years. I haven't had 29 years on the council, but I know for 29 years there hasn't been a process. So this is a major step. This is a very important step. Every other city employee is evaluated, but the three people that we look to for leadership really hasn't been evaluated in a fashion that you can articulate. My understanding is several years people haven't been evaluated, way back. But that's not fair to the employees. It's not fair to us. We would not have a direction without some kind of process. So having something come forward this evening is fantastic, in my opinion. Been on the council 5 years, and I've been pushing for something that's reasonable, understandable, and is an action item. We've got it. I think the disagreement here this evening is to exactly who's going to administer it. And when I first took a look at, say, the draft last week, I was a little concerned that this was a major change in that FOP, as we call it today, wasn't handling it. But then, you know, I thought a little bit more about who really handled it in the past. You know, we really weren't sure. And who handled the hiring of the city manager? 20 years ago, the mayor did. Was there an FOP? Was there a personnel committee? I think there were 4 committees back then. I fully understand some of the points that my colleague is making, but I think this has been beaten around by everybody in some fashion, whether it's been a forum, a discussion, how do we do it, how do we have input? If I'm reading this thing right, and sometimes I don't read it right, stuff right, I don't get my bifocals in the right place, everybody's got a chance, everybody here. Well, you know what? The mayor doesn't have much of a chance, but he's going to be the,
You're right.
he's going to be the organizer.
My role is purely ministerial. I have no
Everybody's
substantive
got
role.
a chance to have input to the city managers, the city attorney, and the city clerk's evaluation. And we're asking 3 people to sort of organize it, and 1 person to finalize it in a format that's understandable, easy to work with, and you can refer to back to throughout the year, and use it again the following year as accomplishment of goals and whatnot. So I really don't want to see it go back. We've missed a whole year here for these 3 employees that they haven't been evaluated. We kick it again. We're going to kick it again. Let's move forward here. I don't think, and I'm not the lawyer, but I don't think we're violating any laws here, and I don't think we're adverse to the charter. I know we're not adverse to the charter, and I don't think we're adverse to the council's rules. So I ask you to consider what everybody's had to say. I don't dismiss what Councilor Clark has had to say about the, how quick we've gotten to this process and where we've gotten to. But I think it's time for this to move forward, and let's get about the business of doing the council's business to evaluate their employees. Thank you.
Council Filio.
I agree with everything Council Powers said. However, I will be in favor of sending it back to committee just because there's doubt in the air. And for those people watching, I'm sure there's more doubt out there. Following up what the mayor and Councilor Greenwald said, I chaired the Finance Committee for 6 years. This process has been ongoing, I guess kind of like the master plan in a way. It's just been an ongoing process. It's always been in the open. But the evaluation situation, it was a lot more informal. As some of you that have been around for a while know, there really wasn't a good set procedure, and I applaud Councilor Greenwald for putting together something more definitive. A little bit what Councilor Clark had alluded to is how the Finance Committee always handled it. The mayor and Councilor Greenwald are right. There used to be 4 committees. So the Finance Committee was made up by the 3 committee chairs and 2 other people. The reason it went back to 3 committees and Finance was just separate than just 2 more was because if you were on the Finance Committee, you were here every night of the week, literally. That's why it was brought back to 3 committees. There was no hocus pocus or anything going on. It's just that you were on the Finance Committee, you lived here at least 3 nights a week, sometimes 4, because there was always something going on. So that's where that evolved. So that hasn't changed all that much. Whether it's the chairs or the finance, it's kind of 2 of the same. So with that said, I will agree to send it to committee just because I think when there's doubt out there, let's just go on the side of caution, especially for those that are watching it tonight. A couple more weeks isn't going to hurt anything, and it will allow Councilor Clark and everybody to put everything out in the open. There's nothing wrong with waiting a couple more weeks.
Further comments? Councilor Richards.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, I want to thank Councilor Clark for having this brought to a vote. I think it's important everybody votes on it because it shows you've read it, shows you understand. And it is an experiment, so actually, I'll move on to my prepared remarks so I don't stutter so much, right? What I want to do is equate this to what process I go through, which I completed today, and how the corporate world works. So I've been reviewed in a formal process for decades. I know it's hard to believe I'm so young, but I've reviewed associates that report to me for about 9 years, and every year we have a formal process. While it is true this is a review of charter officers, it's also true that there are employees who should expect to be treated with the same respect that any employee of the city would be. All city employees have an expectation that their review for the past year and goal setting for the next year is protected under HR rules and confidential. This process ensures that for charter employees. It's also true where I work. Much has been said on setting of goals. At issue is that charter officers set their own goals. This being said, right, these goals should be in line with stated council goals. For example, Southeast neighborhood revitalization, master plan implementation, and other goals that council has voted on and approved. In my goal-setting process, my superiors told me, these are the company goals for the next year. We need you to set your goals in concert with them. In my goal-setting process, my superior determines if I have set my goals appropriately, and in this case, City Council. If I have them right, boom, they're approved. If not, they're returned with comments and direction to guide me into resetting them, which actually happened twice. I had this third bite at the apple before my goals got established this year. The new review process is a professional process that respects the ability of charter employees to set their goals and then have them reviewed by council and approved. In action and intention, this proposed process is virtually the same as the process I just completed today. The new review process envisions input from all councilors, and that the chairs of each committee organize, review, and submit thoughts, concerns, and suggestions throughout the process. This new process is organized to respect both the wishes of the council while respecting the confidentiality that any city employee should expect. And I might add to other comments made that for the first time since I've been on council, a professional process has been set up for the evaluation of charter employees. And what's been said can be said again. Whoever's the mayor, whoever's the finance chair, it changes every single time those positions change. And that's not really fair to anybody. Now, we may not get it perfect the first time, and we may need to look at this again. But I think we should work with this process, review the outcomes, and determine if it worked, how well it worked, and what further improvements may be needed to create a long-term professional review and goal-setting process. So I think we're really in a great place as far as we've moved this to a very much more professional setting. Now, if this gets moved back, I will not have a problem with that, all right? Because if you want to discuss it more, I'm good. But I think this process, I mean, it mirrors what we do, and everybody knows I work for a big company, and this is the way we've done it for decades. And I think we're on track to be much more professional than we used to be. Thank you.
Further comments? Councilor Jones.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad we're coming along with a more streamlined process. If I do have an amendment, if Councilor Clark's amendment does fail, but I would.
Councilor Clark.
I have not made an amendment. I have made a proposal.
You made a motion to refer it back to committee at
Well, if
this
this
point.
proposal does fail, I'm sorry. Okay. And I do, just the fact that someone on the committee felt that it was presented as informational and there wasn't allowed input tells me that we are lacking transparency. So I agree that it should go back to committee. It's not a time-sensitive issue. So I agree with the motion.
Councilor Hansel.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to reiterate some of what Councilor Richards said and what the mayor said, that this is an experiment. That we're not writing this into our permanent rules or anything yet. This is something to try out. By moving this forward, you're choosing action as opposed to inaction. And judging by what the other councilors who have been on a lot longer than I have, there's been a lot of kicking the can and a lot of inaction on this issue. So I will be voting in favor of moving this proposal forward as an experiment, because I don't see any downside to it. We can always tweak it, make it official down the road, work on it. That's what we do in business. You try something, you improve upon it. That's how it works. So I'll be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Councilor Chadbourne.
I think there's two issues here. One is, we all agree there needs to be a structured, constructive way to do charter members who are employees of the city, their reviews. And I think that it's important. But the other issue is transparency. And I would have to agree with Councilor Clark, and I would be in favor of sending it back to the committee, because there's this, it's true, it fell off the radar and then came back. There was a few people that discussed the issue, and they had good intentions. They want action to occur, and they want to do something that's that would benefit the employees, the charter members. But we all didn't have a discussion about it, and we all didn't have an opportunity to weigh in on it. And I have even a third idea on this, but I'm not here to fight that particular issue unless that's the road we end up going down, is taking an action tonight. I think in the name of transparency, it really should go back to committee and should be discussed, and that all of the counselors need to be having a discussion, and it shouldn't be here happening now on the floor. I don't agree with it. And how many other times where other issues have come up, like with the airport, and we thought, in all fairness, there was all these people, including myself, that wanted a decision right then and there that night, and we thought, in all fairness, it needs to go back in the name of transparency. It's got to go back to finance. And yeah, it pushes it out a little longer, but I think it would speak volumes if we did that. And those of us that might have felt slighted because we were out of that process and suddenly are here having to take a vote or take a side and say something immediately without further discussion and further thinking on it, I think it would go miles to send it back to committee.
Councilor Manwaring.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to say it's interesting what Bettina, Councilor Chadbourne said, because she and I were at the Finance Committee that we saw that it was going to be discussed, and that's certainly why I was at Finance Committee last week. And I don't know if that was her reason, but anyway, we were there and we got to say a few things. So to think that we've never had a chance, I think, is a little harsh. I just wanted to say that my intent, if it goes forward with the committee chairs, my intent is to meet with each person that is on my committee, one-on-one, because it can't be two-on-one, correct?
You can't have a quorum.
Can't have a quorum. So that means one-on-one, and maybe I'll follow Cynthia's idea and take people to lunch. But I think it's, if that's the way we go, that's that important that that as a committee chair, I set a time for each counselor that's on my committee. So just so that, and I take notes. I'm a note taker. So I take notes on what people say, and I think that that sort of helped me feel like, okay, people really are going to get a chance to say something in this process. And I guess the other concern I have is that I'm only in, this is what, my 6th year or 7th year, I get confused here, but anyway, somewhere in there. And I have just always been treated so well by the city manager, the city attorney, and the city clerk, that if I have a question, they put their things down and they answer it. And, they have treated me with respect. And I really want a process that is going to respect them, their privacy. I need that to, I think that's really important, I guess is what I want to say. Thank you.
Further comments? Councilor Hooper.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. Choked up over this. I would say that looking at this proposal and how it's working out is a very fair proposal that the group has come up with. But I will say that I do think that it does need to have not only this transparency, which is a wonderful opportunity to get everyone involved, including the council. I agree with Councilor Filio. I don't think it would be bad to take it back to committee just for another couple of weeks and just have a completion of that transparency to the public and have the committee discuss it one more time And having said that, if this is adopted, I think it's a great plan and a huge improvement over what has happened in the past. And I commend everyone for coming forth with this particular way of evaluating the charter members. I would like it to go back to committee, though. Thank you.
Councilor Sutherland.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just one last, I don't, from everything I've heard this evening, I don't think there's anybody who opposes specifically the process that's incorporated here. And what I think we'd like to see is have it, for those who will vote to have it go back to committee, is to have the committee make a recommendation to adopt this rather than to accept it as informational. Thank you.
Councilor Greenwald.
Thank you, Your Honor. First of all, I have to apologize to Councilor Filio as I was taking the walk down the FOP chair Hall of Fame. How quick we forget. Yeah. And, maybe I just want to really speak up a little aggressively that I do object to allegations, insinuations that there's been something sneaky or underhanded going on here. Because, just to share, a very obvious fact, I have designed the previous processes of evaluation, and no one gave me any input on this. It just happened. So, and this is a private process that goes on between this council and that employee. This is not something that is made public. If you're, the differences between Councilor Clark's proposal, and I know we're discussing bringing it back to committee or not, is whether the committee chairs are the recipients of the information or somehow it gets funneled directly into FOP. So if you don't like the original plan and you like the other one, then you have something to say and to react to. I think there's a really good plan in front of you. And with it moving along informational, that pretty much was as it would have been in previous years. So in answer to Councilor Sutherland, what we are discussing now is actually to validate perhaps what's in front of you instead of just accepting as informational, which means I hope you read it. So the discussion is appropriate here, and if Councilor Clark prevails in his request to bring it back to committee, we'll go through the same discussion again next Thursday, and if not, we'll be moving to actually implement.
Councilor Clark.
Well, thank you. It would be nice if we were be able to bring this back to committee because we'd be able to talk about some of the specifics in this proposal that we hadn't been able to discuss on July 28th when it was supposed to come back out of more time. Whether or not it is the three chairs who do the evaluation or if it's the full Finance Committee that does the evaluation, or whether it's the full council getting narrative and a filled out evaluation form, self-evaluation form from the chair, from the employees, like we've always had, or whether or not we're not going to get that information. Under this proposed plan here, all of the other counselors would not be able to see the self-evaluation by the employees, would not be able to see what the goals that are discussed. I mean, that we have implemented a council goals committee to try to come up with goals to present to our charter employees, to work with them throughout the year to see what we can do in steps to implement our master plan. And if we're not even able to see how these employees are going to implement those plans, and which this particular plan here shuts you out of, you're not going to get to be able to see that. You're going to get to see the blank evaluation forms. And you're going to be able to fill out these blank forms without any knowledge on how the employee feels about it, what they've done last year. You know, I've been here, this is my 7th year, and over those times, I've always gotten a narrative from the charter employee of what they did last year and what they hope to do next year. You're not going to be able to see that, according to this. You're going to get a blank form, and you're just going to be able to ask questions or make input for some, you know, not knowing what they feel. I think that there's a lot of tweaks that needs to go into this. I mean, this was a plan that was put together without anybody else's input in a public way. I mean, I'm sure that there must be. It says that there are other counselors who were involved in this, but they didn't identify them. I wasn't one of them. And I'm the one who initiated the council goals process. And I wasn't involved in this. Were you? Were you? Let's bring this back to committee. Let's hash this out in public. Let's find out what we want to do in public. Let's not just do this in the background here.
Council Filio.
Move the question.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? If not, we will accept the motion to move the question, and we will call for a vote on sending this back to committee. All those in favor of referring this back to committee?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
All those opposed?
Hands up, please. Carl, Jan.
It's a tie.
It's a tie.
Dave.
No, 6.
It can't be right.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
7 no for
So must have been a
referral.
tie. I missed the one.
Are we missing someone? Oh, yeah. Gary. Don't even see him.
Gary,
No, it's a 14-member council, so this can't be right. I think you should call for the vote again, just to make sure we're clear.
I think I'm going to call for a roll call.
Math was not my
Will the
strong suit.
clerk
but I
please
got
call the
this.
roll?
Oh, to send back.
To refer back.
So Counselor Jacobs.
No.
Counselor Manwaring.
No.
And Counselor O'Connor.
Yes.
Counselor Clark.
Yes.
7 to 7.
Counselor Khan.
No.
And Counselor Filio.
Yes.
Counselor Powers.
No.
Counselor Sutherland.
Yes.
Counselor Hansel.
No.
And Counselor Hooper.
Yes.
And Counselor Chadbourne.
Yes.
Counselor Jones.
Yes.
Counselor Richards.
No.
Counselor Greenwald.
No.
Okay, Mayor, you're up.
So the mayor gets to break
Long
it.
time.
And the poor mayor.
7.
Gary.
If the council is so evenly divided on this issue, I'm going to move to send it back to committee.
It's all right, you can be happy. When was the last time?
Okay, that brings us to
Point of order.
city manager.
Point of order.
Yes.
Excuse me, Your Honor, I'm sorry. I'm confused. Does this mean that my proposal also goes back to committee, or is that still on the table? And what?
Oh, I took that off the table, that the issue goes back to committee.
So both.
Your
both-
proposal goes back to
Thank
committee
you,
with
sir.
it.
Everybody's is gone.
Everything goes back.
I should be interested to see how many people show up at FOP next week to participate in this.
Can the charter officers be excused in that discussion?